Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something a little different. We're breaking down a document that treats the age of the universe like a cold case file, putting the entire 13.8 billion year consensus on trial.
Okay, so right out of the gate, this document drops an absolute bombshell of a claim. It says the standard story of the cosmos isn't a scientific discovery at all, but a theological coup. The argument is that the whole consensus is basically a metaphysical hallucination, a story we tell ourselves to avoid the idea that the universe might have had a directed origin.
So how does it start to build this case? Well, it doesn't begin with telescopes or complicated math. Nope. It starts by going after the very methodology of modern cosmology itself, arguing there's a huge foundational error in how we even think about science.
The first move is to draw a really sharp line between two kinds of science. On one side, you've got what it calls operational science, the stuff you can test, repeat, and predict, like chemistry in a lab. But on the other side, there's historical science, which it shows as this tangled mess. The argument here is that cosmology is basically a form of reverse storytelling, just guessing about the past from what we see today. And it claims that passing this off as the same thing as operational science is nothing short of a fraudulent bait and switch.
Okay, now let's get into the exhibits. The audit lays out its evidence against the standard model, just like a prosecutor would in a courtroom.
Exhibit A is what the document calls the 95% fudge factor. It hammers on the fact that the standard model only hangs together if 95% of the entire universe is made of dark matter and dark energy, stuff we can't see and have never directly found. The document calls these things secular ghosts, and even says the model is basically a metaphysical Ponzi scheme.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The document doesn't just criticize, it offers a totally different way to look at this. It reinterprets this mysterious dark sector through the lens of Kabbalah or Jewish mysticism. It suggests that what scientists are calling dark matter could actually be the gravitational fingerprints of sublime sephiros, divine emanations or higher dimensions pressing down on our reality. In this view, the weird anomalies aren't because of missing matter. They're the system overhead of a much bigger, layered cosmos. Pretty wild, right?
Next up, Exhibit B takes aim at cosmic inflation. Now, this is the idea that the universe, for just a tiny fraction of a second, expanded way faster than the speed of light. It was the theory brought in to fix some major problems with the original Big Bang model. But this document just dismisses it as a secular deus ex machina, basically a convenient, out-of-nowhere solution that relies on some hypothetical, unobserved energy field to save the whole theory from falling apart.
And then for Exhibit C, it's just this rapid-fire list of what it calls contaminated evidence. All these cracks that are showing up in the standard model's foundation. It points to things like the James Webb Telescope finding these huge, mature galaxies that just shouldn't exist that early in the universe. It brings up controversies in radiometric dating and the full-blown crisis in trying to measure how fast the universe is even expanding. Each point is presented as another anomaly that the standard model is really struggling to explain away.
Okay, so after spending all this time arguing that the physical evidence is basically unreliable, the audit makes this huge, dramatic pivot. It says that if we want any real certainty about time, we have to completely abandon the methods of physics and switch to an entirely new kind of data.
And this slide just captures that pivot perfectly. The document argues that a witnessed horizon, a specific observed event in history, is a way more reliable form of data than any scientific calculation about the distant past. It's a total shift in methodology. We're leaving the lab and we're entering the courtroom.
So if testimony is the key, then who's the star witness? Well, the audit doesn't point to a single person. It points to an entire nation, all at one single moment in time, the revelation at Mount Sinai.
And the testimony it presents is intense. It describes a thermoacoustic singularity, a divine voice so powerful it literally shattered trees, and a collective experience where the souls of the entire nation were ripped from their bodies and then brought back to life. The document's conclusion here is forensic. It argues that inventing a national memory of mass death is a psychological impossibility, maybe even more impossible than the event itself.
But come on, testimony from thousands of years ago? That needs some serious verification. How can we possibly trust that this signal hasn't been corrupted over all that time? Well, the audit lays out a formal protocol for how this ancient record was supposedly authenticated.
The argument here is that this isn't about faith, it's about process. It lays out what it calls a formal audit trail, a chain of custody stretching 40 generations all the way from Sinai to today,
It even compares the transmission system to a modern distributed ledger technology, like a blockchain. The entire nation acted as decentralized nodes, there were built-in error corrections, and the daily legal use of the information helped secure that historical timestamp.
And to strengthen its case even more, the audit points to what it calls hostile nodes, external verification from the nation's enemies. It cites things like the Egyptian Merneptah stele, which actually mentions Israel, the Tel Dan stele referring to the House of David, and Assyrian records. The point it's making is powerful. The most reliable verification comes from people who had zero incentive to help tell your story.
This all leads to a pretty direct accusation of a massive double standard in academia. This slide puts it side by side. On one hand, we widely accept historical figures like Socrates based on the writings of just 2 of his students with no physical proof. On the other, the Sinai event, which it claims is backed by millions of witnesses and a heavily audited chain of transmission, is dismissed.
So now we come to the closing argument. After presenting all this evidence, the audit boils the entire debate down to what it calls a final binary choice between 2 completely different ways of seeing reality itself.
And this is the choice it presents. Worldview 1, the universe is a stochastic machine, a random, chaotic explosion with unguided processes that needs deep time to act as a stand-in for a creator. Or, Worldview 2, the universe is a directed message, something that was initialized in a functionally mature state, a direct speech act from a sovereign author, all secured by a witnessed timestamp.
The document then delivers its final, unambiguous verdict. It declares the 13.8 billion year figure a syntax error, a mathematical mirage. And in its place, it holds up the 5786 year record as a sovereign legal fact, verified by that continuous chain of custody. It doesn't end with a scientific conclusion, but with a legal charge. This secular establishment is guilty of obstruction of justice against the truth. A pretty provocative end to a forensic audit of time itself.